Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Good day, and welcome back to Mike's Radio Repair and Restoration. In a previous video, I said we were going to go over tools and equipment, test equipment, that you need to restore tube radios, but we're going to do so very affordably. We're not going to be spending a lot of money on fancy test equipment, just some real basic stuff. So we're going to go through hand tools, not the cut type of basic handyman tools like screwdrivers, needle nose pliers. I'm sure you're all very well familiar with that stuff, but we'll go through some of the more specialized stuff you may run into. And as you can see, my shelf here is bare. We're going to go through all of the test equipment pieces one at a time and talk about them, where I got them and what we use them for. And once again, we're going to make this all affordable. These are some of the more specialized hand tools that I use. Everybody's familiar with the regular side cutters. These nippers, that's what I guess I call these. These are side nippers. They're very small, and they're great for getting into tight spots, and they're quite sharp. Very handy to have. There's a selection of pick tools here, which I use for a multitude of different tasks. They're all very handy, so having some pick tools are handy. These are tools for tuning RF transformers. A little bit more about these later. Of course, you're going to need a set of Allen keys. For loosening set screws on some of the knobs are Allen keys. And you may need a set of these. Some of the more fancier, or I think, 1940s going into the 1950s, Hallicrafter began using what are called Bristol wrenches. They look like an Allen key, but they're not. They're very similar to shape as a Torx bit, but they're not a Torx bit. And you can really run up against it. For instance, the SX99 has Bristol wrench set screws on the control knobs. So you may need to get a set of these. These you can get on eBay. Bristol wrench, easy to get, cheap. A set of nut drivers is handy. Now you're also probably going to want some jumpers, and I have two types here. Notice the red one here. You get them in sets of 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever they are. The two jumpers got alligator clips on the end, which are extremely handy and very useful. And this one here has got a banana plug, which will plug into one of your test meters, as well as a clip on the end here. These are going to be needed for one of the piece of safety equipment that we are going to build a little later on here. This is a very basic Lazy Susan for the kitchen, if you will. I like using them for tuning and other odds and sods. You can throw an old cloth down. You can take a radio like this old S38. When you're tuning it, you often have to get at the back or the bottom to get a hold of some of these adjusters. And having the ability to turn something around very easily is kind of very nice. So that's kind of a cheap solution for that. I like that very much. Now, all of this stuff that I'm showing you here, or most of it anyways, like I said, the Bristol spline kit you can get on eBay. I'll be posting links to Amazon in the description below the videos to where you can get some of this stuff. Again, none of it's very expensive. This is your local hardware store stuff, and this you can get on eBay. This is a local hardware store thing. A nut driver set, there's a myriad of different options that you can use for that. When it comes time to deal with soldering, there are many choices out there. Affordably, again, on Amazon, I bought this soldering station about a year ago just to test it for this very idea of being able to recommend it. And this has a soldering iron, which is temperature adjustable. You can turn the temperature up and down based on the buttons there. And this is a hot air blower. This is more suited to the guys who work with surface mount technology stuff, and chips and whatnot. But it comes in handy for doing heat shrink and those types of things. The nice part about this is when you holster the soldering iron, after a certain period of time, it goes into sleep mode and shuts down, which is, I find, very handy. Another thing you're going to need is a high wattage soldering iron. This is an 80 watt. It's a big soldering iron. It makes a lot of heat. And often you're going to be replacing these type of cylindrical capacitors that are often soldered directly to the chassis, and you need a lot of spot heat to be able to unsolder some of these tabs. So you're definitely going to need a soldering iron like that. Again, there's links below to where you can get this type of stuff. This is a little soldering blowtorch. Again, heat shrink tubing, soldering large connectors, all kinds of uses. But again, none of this is very expensive. You can have it quite cheap. You don't have to get this type of a station. You can get just a basic 35, 40 watt pencil soldering iron if you like. I just like the ability to adjust the temperature and a few other things. Sleep function is handy for me. It just makes my workstation a little bit more comfortable. Another tool you're going to need is a vacuum desoldering tool. Very simple tool that's spring-loaded. And when you push the button, it creates a vacuum at the tip. So when you've heated up a terminal and the solder is turned to a molten mass, and you want to remove that solder, you can very simply draw it off, and it gets stored inside this container here, and you can empty it out once in a while. Again, a very handy little device. Helps you clear up some of the terminals that you'll be dealing with. So not an emergency item to get, but again, it's not expensive. I don't know what they're worth nowadays, but I'm sure you can probably get one for $20 or less. I've had this one for many years. It's quite a handy device. Okay, let's get into some of the basic metering. Let's talk about this guy in the middle first. This is just a super cheap multimeter you could buy at any hardware store. I've recommended one below in the comments below. It's handy for doing low voltage measurements, fast continuity checks. You'll use it, but not a whole bunch when it comes to tube radios. This one here came off Amazon. This is not for measuring voltage, but it's a resistance, capacitance, and inductance meter. And I bought this with great skepticism because it was quite affordable on Amazon. And now after using it for about 6 months, it's actually quite accurate. When it comes to capacitance and resistance, it's pretty much bang on, and it's pretty darn close for inductance. So this, to me, was a steal of a deal compared to some of the more expensive pieces I've got. What this cost was absolutely dirt cheap. This is optional. This is another capacitance meter. This measures capacitance as well. But this also will do a measurement of what's called ESR, which gives you an idea of the leakage and internal resistance, whether a capacitor is good or not. You don't really need it. I have it out of curiosity sake. I've tested it. It's okay. It's so-so. I wouldn't be breaking the bank to buy one. But this one here, this one's been great. And a basic multimeter for doing low voltage DC or AC stuff, or checking like your hot and neutral on your AC plug. A basic meter like that would work really nicely. Okay, so we're looking at 3 different types of meters here. 2 are kind of the same and one's different. This is a good old-fashioned Simpson's 260 meter. This one's a Series 5. You can buy these on eBay quite reasonably, with the proviso you buy from a reputable seller who has tested it. So I've seen them go for $50 to $100. And I don't recommend, if you want to, and I'm sorry, these meters here are, this particular one is good for measuring high voltage DC. Upwards of over 600 volts, which you could be dealing with, or more if you're getting into a transmitter. So a meter like this is needed because your digital multimeter, the cheap ones, won't go that high. They're also very good for when it comes to doing alignment. They're handy in that regard. So you can get these off of eBay, again, from a reputable seller. This one is a Series 5. They made them Series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think they're up to Series 8 or 9 now. But I don't recommend you buy anything more than a Series 6. Series 4, 5, or 6, to me, they're the better ones. They're a little bit more solid. Anything past Series 6, I've seen an awful lot of trouble and heartbreak with. So I like this one here now. You know, this one's Series 5. It's a nice old meter. This is a Heathkit vacuum tube voltmeter, and you might say, well, what's a vacuum tube voltmeter? The basic concept of this is that the probes are very high impedance, so you can fish around in a circuit without disturbing it too much. And again, you can measure some very high voltage. This is the same. This is another Simpson's vacuum tube voltmeter, and it'll do the same job. These two guys will do the same job. This is just a nice big display. This one I bought from a local amateur for $20. He couldn't make it work properly. It was always 20% out, and of course it frustrated him. And in this probe, there was a 1 megohm resistor that had drifted to 1.2 megohm. Then I replaced that resistor, and the meter's now bang on accurate. This I got off eBay for $90. So a vacuum tube voltmeter that measures high voltage DC and AC is very handy. You're going to need one, that's for sure. And you know, an old girl like the Simpsons here would be great, or a Heathkit vacuum tube voltmeter. Again, you know, quiz the seller, make sure it's tested and functioning, and they got a decent feedback. There's a lot of shysters on eBay selling junk. Make sure you ask the direct questions before you buy. If you're dealing with a good guy, he'll come back and he'll answer your questions and he'll give it to you straight. Often when you don't get a response, those are big red warning flags that something's wrong. So this is older equipment. You can't buy this new, but you can get it affordably on eBay. Shop wisely, shop carefully. Here's a handy couple little devices here. They're the same. This is a T4, this is a T12. They were originally Heathkit units. They are signal tracers. Very, very handy units. You can follow a signal through a radio, both audio and RF. Meaning if you have a signal generator and you feed a signal into a radio, let's say that your radio's not working, you can begin following it through the radio till the signal disappears, or whatever you're looking for. I was working on a Johnson Viking 2 transmitter. The interstage audio transformer was gone, and I replaced it. And it modulated again, but the audio was distorted, and I could go through the audio section stage by stage with this until I found the distortion problem. So it has a tuning eye and a gain control. This one here, the T12, is crazy expensive on eBay, and it shouldn't be. And again, I bought this from a local radio amateur very, very reasonably for $25, $30. This one I got on eBay many years ago for like $60 or whatever. The T4 you'll find cheaper than this one. The bottom line is inside there pretty much the same, but the newer model is just updated with the fancier knobs, a slightly different case, but it's not any better. But this signal tracer is kind of sort of a must for finding noisy components, tracing down problems with your radio. If you get into a radio and you replace all the capacitors, away it go, great, you don't need it. But if you get into a radio and you still can't find the problem after recapping it and checking all the resistors, this is your go-to tool. Some guys like to use a scope. Very simply, I can feed the signal into the radio and follow it through very quickly and get to the problem within a matter of minutes. So highly recommended that you have one of these old signal tracer devices. There are other companies that make them, and Heathkit makes larger units. They're okay too. ICO makes some of them, although I don't currently have one, so you know, buyer beware. But I can recommend these, anything that the Heathkit makes with this type of a probe that's got the RF and audio switch on them. It's very handy. Couldn't recommend these enough to a guy starting out. You can trace the signal going into a tube and then follow it right back out again, every stage through the radio. Once you get through the RF stages of the radio and it begins to detect and convert into audio, that's it. You can switch it into audio, and you can go through the audio stages right to the speaker, right straight through the radio, and find exactly where the problem is. Okay, moving on now. Something that you actually, before I continue, I got to apologize. You're probably hearing popping and squeaking and whistling in the background, and my wife has a couple of African gray parrots. And they just love the noises radio makes, the pops, the whistles, the clicks, the sounds, the CW, the heterodynes. And they're quite happy to join in and sing along. As you can hear in the background, they're squawking now. Anyways, moving on. An item that you absolutely have to have is a signal generator. And historically, you can get an older one that isn't so accurate. You need to know where you are, what signal you're generating, what the exact frequency is. So along 6 or 8 months ago, I bought this off of Amazon. This is a signal generator. I don't recommend this whatsoever. I'm not listing it below. If you see this, run as fast away as you can from it. The dial here is grossly inaccurate. It drifts horribly. This is not what you want. This is a happy medium. These can be had for less than $200. This is a function generator, but we can use it as a signal generator as well. So it'll do a sine wave, a square wave, a triangle wave, and you can dial the amplitude right from nothing up to quite strong. And you can also modulate the carrier with an AC tone, which is also very handy. So this is going to be a really key piece of equipment that you're going to need for setting up, for aligning your old radios, in which they need alignment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But this is a very affordable way of getting a bang-on accurate signal generator. That again, you can see I've got this one set for sine wave. It's where you need to be, and you can change the amplitude again, like I said, and you can also feed a tone into it. It's got a built-in tone generator, so you can modulate a signal and pass it through. Great for doing your 455 kilohertz IF alignment, doing your front end alignment, doing your oscillator alignment. This is absolutely needed to do the final steps of your radio. Once you get it working, if you want to make it function like new, you absolutely have to have a signal generator. So there you have it. You can see we've built up our basic test equipment lineup. We've got our vacuum tube voltmeters. We've got our Simpsons here for measuring high voltage DC. We've got a signal tracer. We've got our signal generator. We've got our resistance, inductance, and capacitance meter, which again, I highly recommend. We've got a basic digital voltmeter. We've got our hand tools. We've got our soldering station. We're ready to rock and roll. And we didn't spend thousands of dollars doing it. We a smart chopper between Amazon and smart shopping on eBay. You get what you need quite affordably. Once you have essentially, a meter like this, maybe a signal tester, a generator, your soldering station, some meters, you're ready to roll. You can follow me along and repair radios if you like. But I mean, that's about it. So if you've got questions, please leave them below. I absolutely will get to them as soon as I possibly can. And we thank you very much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button like everybody on YouTube says. You get notifications of when I'm releasing new videos. I got lots of new videos coming up. I'm going to be doing one on identifying capacitors. I'm going to be starting work on this S38 here coming up, and lots of other neat stuff. So please hit subscribe. Again, thank you very much for your time. Questions, no problem, leave them below, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So again, thanks for tuning in.
The American Broadcasting Company and affiliated stations present Headline Edition with Taylor Grant. From all over the world, wherever the day's headlines are made, Headline Edition brings you accurate, timely reports on the news behind those headlines, plus informative in-person interviews with the men and women who made the headlines today. Today's edition presents a roundup of the latest developments in the finding of a flying disc, an eyewitness report of today's significant action in the UN Security Council.